Welcome to the Open Line. Your window to the stories behind the stories. Inside the news through discussion and discovery on 560 CFOS.
It is Thursday, August the 20th, 2015. Good morning and welcome to the Open Line on 560 CFOS. I am your host, Manny Pava, as I switch chairs. And our producer, who's been working all morning, a tired man after spending an evening on the Chichimon, Steve Ritchie.
Still awake.
Good for you.
Still awake. Really? I'm awake, really.
Coffee is magical, isn't it?
It is.
It's fantastic. But today, we resume our commitment to you to make sure that you are educated and you become an educated voter for the upcoming federal election. When you cast your ballot in the October 19th vote, we want to make sure that you are informed. And today we profile another candidate in the riding of Bruce Grey Owen Sound. The NDP candidate in the riding is David McLaren, and he is in studio this morning, ready to take your questions and calls when we return to the Open Line this morning on 560 CFOS.
The story behind the story. Back to the Open Line on 560 CFOS.
Good morning. This is the Open Line, and our guest today is David McLaren, the NDP candidate in Bruce Grey Owen Sound, as we will spend the next 50 minutes or so talking to David about this federal election campaign to make sure you are educated and get enough information so you can cast your ballot in the October 19th vote. I have a number of questions for David this morning, but I invite you to call in and be a part of the show as well. 376-7777, toll free, 1-800-265-3757, the number to call this morning on the show. David, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Morning, Manny. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good.
How have you found the campaign so far?
Well, it's starting to heat up, that's for sure. More and more emails coming in, more and more phone calls coming in to the campaign phone number. Some information already starting to flow out there. I had an email from somebody who was saying, well, what are the NDP going to do about this long gun registry? I hear everything from they want to reinvent it and they want to take away pistols and semi-automatic rifles, including hunting rifles. And so let me right off the top say, no, we're not going to do that. That was something that was discussed a few years ago, and we have no interest in reinventing the long gun registration and no interest in interfering with hunters and farmers and First Nations people who already know how to use their firearms. As for the rest of it, I was talking with, I went to the dentist's office the other day, Manny, and I was talking with the dental secretary there, and I said, as I was presenting my insurance information, I said, how are people these days? Are you still finding that they have insurance for dental work? And she says, it used to be that would be the norm. People would come in and they would have insurance. Now it's the other way around. People usually that are coming into her office right now do not have insurance. And that is yet another indication that there are folks who are really having a tough time in this area, in this particular area, and probably right across Canada as well.
Paying for insurance.
Not only paying for insurance, but not having enough money at the end of the month, not having enough money in their paycheck to pay for things that they used to have, or not having the jobs that would give them the benefits that they need in order to have things like their teeth fixed properly. So the thing that I'm most interested in this particular campaign, and one of the reasons I decided to run, was to do something, finally, about the inequality that is quite harsh right now in our society. Not only our society in Canada, but in the UK and in the United States. But, we have the third highest level of working age poverty amongst 17 similar economies. The third highest level. We're somewhere a little bit ahead of Japan and quite a bit ahead of the United States. But the third highest level. I mean, here we are, one of the best countries in the world. There's no question. Canada is one of the best countries in the world, and yet we have this underlying poverty amongst working people. We have jobs that are not paying people enough money to get to the end of the month. We have waiting lists for subsidized housing. You know, if you're going to work 40 hours a week, you shouldn't have to go to the food bank in order to feed your family. So there is something that we need to, there's something fundamentally breaking, I think, in our economy, and we have to start to rethink how we do the economy. I don't think that the solutions that the Conservatives and the Liberals have imposed in the last generation have done us much good.
David McLaren is our guest, the NDP candidate in Bruce Grey Owen Sound. He's already touched on a number of issues in this federal election campaign that it will discuss on the show this morning. I want to give you an opportunity to talk to David as well. 376-7777, the number to call. Walter, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Manny. Good morning, David.
Hi, Walter.
I'm going to pose the same question I did to Larry Miller. If I were the CEO of a corporation and I lost 25% to 30% of the value of my company, would you vote for me? And the part of it is, the other part is the free trade. We've heard this sucking sound of the jobs leaving south and whatever. And I was watching a program on CBC. They were showing the difference in wage disparity between Mexico and Canada with this free trade agreement. It's not a free trade. It should have been a fair trade agreement. But the fact is, they're paying the workers in Mexico 1/10. They did a transformer company. I don't know if it was around Guelph or wherever, but they're paying their workers 1/10 of what they pay in Canada. Now, you can't compete with that. That's where our jobs are leaving. Kia is building a $1 billion plant in Mexico. We haven't had that kind of an investment in ages in this country without subsidizing the jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Walter, thanks for the question, and I think that that's a perfect example of where the economic policies over the last generation have left us. There's no question that the free trade agreements are certainly a double-edged sword. I don't think they're free trade agreements anymore. I think that they are foreign investment agreements. And in fact, we have one with Mexico. Excuse me. We have one with Mexico called the Foreign Investment and Protection Agreement. And that basically allows China to continue doing the kinds of work or the kinds of economy, the kinds of business that they do over there, over here. That's, I don't think, a very fair trade agreement as well. The trouble with the TPP is, well, there's a number of problems with the TPP, and one of the main ones, it has that investment protection section in it. And you're quite right. One of the things that happens with the free trade agreements, unless you're very, very careful and you're a smart negotiator, is that the jobs that you rely on for your manufacturing sector end up going down to the lowest paid sections of the agreement. And in the case that you mentioned, it's Mexico. So what happened was that the free trade agreement that we signed with the U.S. was a good deal. The AutoPac was still in place, and we had a surplus, a trade surplus with the United States. Mexico got involved with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and that plus the ability of capital to move offshore and into China and into Southeast Asia meant that jobs left the United States. The manufacturing sector began to rust out in the United States. That was our major market. We sold to those folks. Our auto sector has begun to suffer, and as you correctly point out, the jobs that should be here in Canada are now going to the United States. So we practically have to bribe companies now in order to set up shop in Canada.
So what would you suggest? You suggest scrapping these trade deals?
I think that they should be looked at. I'm really nervous about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and not only because of what it'll do to jobs, but what it will do to our information. There is a chapter in there on information sharing, and it looks as though we will not have a choice of whether or not we store our private information, customers' private information, onshore in Canada. It looks as if it's going to be opened up to just about any corporation who wants to use it. So there are a number of things that are concerning about the TPP, and I don't think we're negotiating them very smartly. why are we allowing companies, or corporations rather, to have as much power as they are in these agreements? It's got to the point where they actually can sue countries if they don't like the way that country is behaving towards them. So we've already had experiences with the North American Free Trade Agreement where companies have sued Canada because they didn't like the environmental regulations that we were putting in place. And we've been at the losing end of most of those trade disputes. The problem with the trade disputes is that they are done in secret. And so if we have no access to what's going on in those trade agreements, it's not publicized, so we really don't know what the arguments are. We wake up in the next morning and we find we've lost another one, and we don't. So the secrecy around these trade agreements is problematic. And I've brought this up many times with Larry in the paper, because the current TPP is going to be the death knell, I think, of supply management. So the poultry farmers and the egg farmers and the dairy farmers are really going to be on the short end of the stick on this particular trade agreement.
Yet there are other farmers, like the beef farmers, who say this is good because they can get their product into more foreign markets.
Well, I think that they can. I'm not sure they're going to be as well off as they think they are under this agreement, because you have to remember this amongst several partners. One of them is Australia. The other one is Japan. They both have pretty decent beef farming operations, and they'll be wanting to sell to us. So, yes, the markets may open up, and then again, maybe they won't open up quite as widely as the beef farmers hope they will. The agreement with the European trade agreement, for example, means that farmers can no longer use growth hormones if they do, or as much antibiotics as they do in their operations. So, these trade agreements, there's two main reasons, just not including the particular chapters in the agreements. They're done in secret, they're managed in secret, and they change the way that we do things in this country. And so we have to ask, which is more important? Are we going to allow corporations in the economy to trump the political process? Are we going to allow corporations and business to take away the kind of democracy that we've been used to? I think not. And I think that's probably one of the things that distinguish the NDP from the other parties, is that we will resist that.
David McLaren is our guest. He is running for the New Democratic Party in Bruce Grey, Owen Sound, and he wants your comments and your questions this morning on the open line. I have a few more questions myself. We'll return with those questions and your calls on the open line next on 560 CFOS.
Call now. Have your say. 519-376-7777. The open line on 560 CFOS.
Phone lines are open for Bruce Grey, Owen Sound NDP candidate David McLaren as we continue with our theme of educating you, the voter, in this upcoming federal election. And I've got a few callers on the line. Let's go to Ron, Ron has been waiting patiently. Good morning, Ron. What's your question this morning?
Good morning, Manny, and good morning, Dave.
Morning, Ron.
My question is, people who on until disability, for who making money for until disability, that's not enough. If you're working, people take the money off if you're working. So I think I'd like to see ODFP go up a little more.
Ron, thanks very much for the question. I know the disability program is a provincial program. Do you feel that it's something that the federal government can get involved in?
Well, you know, there's a patchwork going on with different programs for different folks and different programs in different provinces. I've heard other people lament the Ontario Disability Program for not paying enough. I mean, why are we taking money away from people if they're going to go out and earn it? It seems to me that it should be the other way around in principle. But the difficulty, I think, is that the safety net is beginning to fray. And we can certainly see this in healthcare. Now, you have to remember that, as I said before, we've been under the same kind of economic management for at least a generation, first under the Liberals and now under the Conservatives. You have to remember that the Martin Chrétien government took 40% out of their social spending, and that included health care. Pardon me. And they only sort of began to put it back with their health accord back in the early 2000s. And now Mr. Harper's coming along, and he wants to take another $36 billion out of the healthcare system by simply not giving the provinces what they need in order to retain it. And this is all done in order to balance budgets. Well, you know, balanced budgets are a good thing. And in fact, the NDP has balanced more budgets across in all their governments since 1981. They've balanced more of their budgets than either the Liberals or the Conservatives. And their debt to revenue ratio has been much lower. So if you want to look at economic management, take a look at the NDP's record on economic management, and keep in mind that Tommy Douglas, when he brought in healthcare, he balanced every single budget of his 17 years as Premier in Saskatchewan and still brought in the healthcare. It's possible to be economically wise and at the same time make sure that people are taken care of. And so the principle is not to defund. I mean, anybody can balance a budget by taking a red pen and cutting costs. You know, you cut jobs, you cut wages, you cut EI benefits, and you cut health care, you cut social spending. Fine, you can do that. It's easy. What's really hard is to find ways of bringing in revenue so that you don't cut back on those programs. Those programs are important. And in fact, if you look at successful countries, you look at the data, and I believe strongly in evidence-based policies. And if you look at the evidence, you find that those countries that have managed to survive the recession in fairly decent shape and deal with poverty are those countries that have three pillars of social programs. One is a universal health care program, which we have, but it's becoming frayed. The other one is a child care program, a universal child care program. And the third one is post-secondary school education, either low tuition fees or no tuition fees. Ireland is making a comeback after suffering greatly in the 2008 recession, mostly because they still retain their free education. So, you know, it's not just Ontario Disability, it's also health care, it's also the Canada Pension Plan, which is becoming more inadequate. We really have to think of another way of doing the economy and of doing government.